And I think more and more people are sort of waking up to certain things being horrible that happened in the 20th century. The 1950s is probably best summed up with suburbia. We create the suburbs, which are supposed to be this utopian ideal of the best of both worlds of the city and of the country. And the problem with that and with how they were practiced is basically the suburbs create sterility. Families were separated. Now, what do I mean by that? Because people are going to hear families were separated and go, oh, wait, but wasn't everybody having dinner together every night? Wasn't that a thing? Yeah, but that's like the only time they interacted. Because dad's at work all day, he is completely drained when he comes home and doesn't have really any time for anybody, for his wife or his kids. And then mom being stuck at home all day, having nothing but chores to do, and occasionally she goes out and does her shopping. She's bored out of her skull because it's a push-button era, push-button convenience of everything. So what does mom do when she's really bored?
When you remove the children from the home like that, for 8 months out of the year, the education system replaces their parents. And then it ultimately just becomes all children in the classroom need to sit perfectly still and stare at the blackboard. Oh, you're a boy? No, now you're ADD.
And we're live, but not until I actually say so in post.
These days I want you to actually make that the intro of the video. We're live, but not until I say so in post.
What are we drinking tonight, Ethan?
So this is straight corn whiskey from the Pinckney Bend Distillery in New Haven, Missouri. It's definitely a corn whiskey. I can very, very strongly taste the corn in it. But it's quite a good one.
Okay.
And
is it sweeter because it's a corn whiskey, or
not? I would say the sweetest whiskeys that I've had are Irish whiskeys, but it's it has that corn taste to it that I can't really describe. You can tell that it's made with corn. It kind of looks, it tastes the way that a dried out corn cob smells.
Okay.
If that helps. That might not help very many people, but it kind of tastes like that. And that's a very pleasant smell. And it's, the corn doesn't necessarily provide a sweetness to whiskey when it's made with corn, because it would have to be a sweeter corn for that to be the case. This is made with corn that was given to them or is sold to them by the Missouri Meerschaum Pipe Company, that bred a species of corn specifically to have a large cob that would be good for pipe making, which nobody ever does. Everybody wants corn to have like massive kernels, but these people were insane and decided they wanted a large cob. So when that corn is harvested, it has to be husked and it has to have all the kernels taken off of it. So ordinarily what they do when they take kernels off of corn is they put the the whole corn cob into a machine, and it removes the kernels from the corn and shreds the cob entirely, so that the cob is just destroyed, because that's trash. We don't need that. But what the Missouri Meerschaum Company does is they have a machine where basically they hang the corn cob from a rope and effectively beat it with chains to get all of the kernels off of it. And then they're left with a cob that's virtually undamaged. But now they have kernels that they don't know what to do with. So then the Pinckney Bend Distillery comes along and says, hey, we have an idea. And lo and behold, you got extra corn. We need corn for whiskey. And thus this whiskey's born.
There you go. It's an amazing story in the sense that you've got two companies helping each other out in that sense. And
they're local. They're right down the highway from one another. It's less than an hour to get from one place to the other.
And this is what communities should be doing. Not that it isn't what communities do. Communities do it, but we're more fragmented in the world. We're more looking to the town and the state and the country and the mega corporation, the next one over, than we are looking to our next door neighbor. So, as a very, very brief way of saying it. So
We want everything imported from one way or another, including our friendships, because we get onto social media and make friends with somebody and become closer friends with somebody halfway across the world than with the person next door.
that's a great line. We want everything imported, including our friendships.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I have a theory about that, but that's going to be for a different podcast.
Okay.
One not specifically, not on this particular topic.
Fair enough.
Somewhat related, but not on this specific topic.
Okay. For my own drink, I am going with just water this evening. Despite the fact that I have an
too.
excellent... Well, fair enough. You've got that. But I've just got water, and even though I have now my own bottle of the excellent cask-finished gin...
Did you stop
the
off and
Pinckney
get
Bend
more of that
distillery.
on your way back, like you said you were going
I
to?
ended up not.
Okay.
I spent so much money this month and that weekend that already at the liquor store that I was just like, I'm not doing any more of that. But it would have been a worthy buy if I had. It's almost like I'll have to go visit you again. Oh wait, that's a given. So
It's definitely going to happen, especially because you have a godson here now. So
yeah. But the reason for the water is because of somebody by the name of Samuel Michael, who's the newborn nephew of one of my best friends here in Minnesota. 15 minutes before he was born, was it yesterday? Yeah. He lost his heartbeat. They resuscitated him. He was stable for a time. And to make a long story short, he is in extremely, extremely critical care right now. And is likely not going to make it. So we've been praying to Mary and St. Joseph and Venerable Fulton Sheen for a miracle. And I would invite any listeners to do the same.
immediately.
So that, yes. So that Samuel words. So that Samuel Michael that he can live. And all the other words that could be said with that, but well, that's enough for now. So yeah, I will gladly enjoy some water in his honor.
I wasn't thinking her I would you too, but I'll definitely not get up and have a second glass.
And the good news, by the time you hear this podcast, we'll probably know one way or the other. And yet, because God...
at time of recording, yes. But
because God is eternal, it doesn't matter if you heard this after the fact. Those prayers can still be effective. So
God exists outside of time. So
mm-hmm.
He can affect time however He wants.
That's probably the greatest life hack, honestly, if you really think about it.
Yeah, it's
the fact that your prayers are not bound to situations in the present. Because God isn't bound to the present. I believe I got that from like a Padre Pio quote. Like he was praying for like his dead grandma or grandpa or something. And somebody asked him like, why are you doing that? And it's like, why can't I? God's outside of time. So
it's also a very Italian way of responding. Why are you doing that? What are you doing? Why not?
It makes a sense. Anyway, so prayers for Samuel. Yeah. We wanted to chat about family this evening. It's kind of the beginning of a two-parter or something that could be delved into in many more than 2 episodes. It'll be more than 2.
It'll be more than 2 parts.
This
is going to take a while.
In many ways, it will be many, many, many episodes. So where I want to go into that, because what do you mean when you say you're going to talk about the family? Ethan, you propose, and I think this is easy enough to say, that the 20th century was the worst century in human history.
I have been saying that for a long time, yes.
Yes.
And I think for a lot of people, that's, especially nowadays, more and more people are sort of waking up to certain things being horrible that happened in the 20th century. So for one thing, there was near constant war happening.
Mm-hmm.
The United States herself was at war for actively at war for more than half of that century. When we consider the First World War, the Second World War, Vietnam, Korea, and the Gulf War, plus whatever other, under the table operations might have been done. So, first of all, there's that. Second of all, there's the not the Industrial Revolution, the Sexual Revolution. There's the
Great Depression.
The Great Depression. Thank you. Which affects the entire world as well. There's the collapse of multiple societies worldwide. Multiple nations that have been standing for centuries just suddenly collapse and have the rug pulled out from under them.
There's an actual pandemic, the Spanish flu.
The Spanish flu, a real pandemic that killed like 6% of the world population. And that was bad. So a lot of really, really bad things happen. And just the general, morally, society takes a huge downward spiral. And there is no one thing that we can look to or blame, because a lot of people like to point a finger and say, well, it's the problem. The problem is this. Is this the fault of those people? It's the fault of this, or it's the deep state, or it's that, or it's it's the world elite, or it's whatever it is. What we're going to look at now is specifically as it pertains to the nuclear family, because if you look at the nuclear family at the beginning of the 20th century and at the end of the 20th century, and then bleeding over into the 21st century, the first quarter of the 21st century, which is what we're about to finish, or we have finished. We're in the middle of this. We're starting the second quarter of the 21st century. The nuclear family has all but completely disappeared at this point. And
perhaps we should define real quick what we mean by the nuclear family. Because I think, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, which both of us will rant about later, but a lot of people when they think of the idealized version of the family, think about something that was the product of the 20th century. And there are a lot of downsides to that. So when you said the nuclear family, I assume you don't mean that.
It's mom and dad who are married and raising children, and the family is strong and together. They pray together and they stay together. Basically.
All right.
All that sort of thing. So I think the best place to start, because I'm an author and I have to be creative every now and again, is to start in medias res. So in the middle of things in the 1950s. Now, some people might say, oh, wait, 1950s, that was like a golden age for the family. It's like this wonderful, fantastic time. No, it wasn't. And let me explain to you what I mean. The 1950s get glorified and they get brought up as nostalgia. Like, oh, it's this great time of entertainment and this great time where, mom and dad and kid were all together in the house, and, Beaver Cleaver, and, oh, that was the 60s. But, the Andy Griffith Show and all that. 1950s were so great, even though that was also like 1960 when that show started. But anyway, the 1950s were so great and so wonderful, and Father Knows Best and all that. They really weren't all that great and wonderful. They did a good job of putting up a front of being great and wonderful. But you don't really have to peel back too much of that onion to find the stinky part. So the 1950s, family life of the 1950s, is probably best summed up with suburbia. Suburbia is a post-World War II invention where, people don't really want to live in the city anymore because it's crowded and noisy. But people don't really want to live in the country because of whatever reasons. It's, farm animals are smelly and it's, too far to go to your neighbor's house. You want to live in the city. You also want to live in the country. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to create a solution with a system. Because that's what the 1950s did. They had a system or a scientific solution for everything, which there isn't a scientific solution for everything. But that is another topic for another podcast, or a different aspect of this particular era that will be discussed sometime later down the road. But basically, the suburbs arise after the Second World War, and the Second World War and the GI Bill, which says that if you served active duty in the military, then the military will pay for you to go to school, which is still a thing today. The Army and the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, even the Coast Guard, I think they all will say stuff like this, or they'll all mention this. And then it even extends into the National Guard. Like if you're in the National Guard, the Army will still pay for you to go to school, at least in some states, if not anywhere. But anyway, so here in the U.S., riding on a high of the Second World War, because we like to think that we won both world wars entirely by ourselves, we create the suburbs, which are supposed to be this utopian ideal, is of the best of both worlds, of the city and of the country. And, you know, there are these mini communities they just pop up everywhere, where it's, you know, there's a bunch of houses and a bunch of neighborhoods. Oh, and there's a school right there, and there's a supermarket, and everything is just right there for you, and it's super convenient. Because, again, convenience being another hallmark of the 1950s. Everything has to be as convenient as humanly possible.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get to one of the downsides of that later on, too. The problem with that, and with how they were advertised, and even with how they were practiced, is basically the suburbs create sterility. Is where it's like, oh, you know, every house and every family is the same. They got the mom and the dad and the 3 kids, the 2 boys and a girl, or the 2 girls and a boy, or whatever it is, and they got the white picket fence out front, and this is the American dream. But under the surface, there's a little bit more going on. Just a little bit worse things going on. Because the generation that built this is the one that we call the greatest generation, and the greatest generation before them. They are a generation that is broken by a half century of war, famine, and pestilence. So if you were 50 in 1950, you have conscious memory of the First World War, the Spanish flu, the Great Depression, and the Dust Bowl, and the Second World War. We forgot to mention the Dust Bowl earlier. Basically, that's when the entirety of the southern Midwest became a giant barren wasteland full of nothing. Dirt and sand, dust, dead trees, dry bushes, hardly any water. And that happens around the same time as the Great Depression and just thereafter.
Yeah, it's not weak-willed. It's not pithy to understand that when the world is ending in your eyes, there's a lot of trauma that can come from that. Yeah. And for them, like, the world is ending. And then it nearly ended again. And then it nearly ended again. And then it nearly ended again. And then potentially again.
Ending.
At least 5 times.
There were what they thought were potentially world-ending catastrophes, or at least catastrophes that were death to their own personal world and their own personal sphere of everything that you could see. Because most of this was also before the invention of television, and all you could actually see was what was literally right before your eyes. Or in a photograph. You know, they got their news through the radio. So,
and their news is going to be events of the outside world, because they're not going to need local events to be told through the news, because
you're talking to your neighbor about your local events.
Yep.
So if you're a farmer and you look out your front door and there is no water and no crops are growing and the trees are all gone because the railroad came through and cut down every single tree so they could lay as much rail as possible, and industrial farms started and destroyed And, industrial farm equipment is way more aggressive, or at least back then it was way more aggressive than hand tools. So it kicks up a ton of dust and chokes the land. Yeah, that's not going to be fun.
Nope.
So I understand why after the Second World War, there's something of a high. Like, because we won the First World War, and then we had the Roaring 20s, which were like a happy 7 years. Until 1929, and then there's a stock market crash, and then everything is depressing again. Everything's sad, everybody's poor. On top of that, nobody can even drink. But we'll get to prohibition later on.
Oh, yeah. The alcohol rant is coming.
This is more a lot of this is more what I was intending for the second, so we'll go a little bit deeper into it for the next part next week. But basically, the greatest generation and before were broken as human beings.
And when you're broken minds, you don't make good decisions.
Broken minds, broken bodies, broken spirits. And that is not a good time to suddenly try to create an ideal. Because when you're broken inside, you try to create something that doesn't have anything resembling a flaw, especially because this is a country founded by Puritans and just has a natural cultural tendency to Puritanism, where everything has to be perfect and exactly this way, or it's wrong, or it's bad, or it's sinful. But here's what the creation of the suburbs does, and this is why I don't like the suburbs at all, or why I don't like that culture at all, and another reason why I don't like the 20th century, or the general culture of it. Families were separated. Now, what do I mean by that? Because people are going to hear families were separated and go, oh, wait, but wasn't everybody having dinner together every night? Wasn't that a thing? Yeah, but that's like the only time they interacted. And when everybody was out the door in the morning. Because dad's spending all day at work. He's working 8-10 hours a day. Which fortunately it's not more than that like it was during the Industrial Revolution, but we're gonna get to that as well. He's working probably in either an office or a factory. If he's living in the suburbs, it's probably an office of some kind, because those are the only people that can actually afford a house in the suburbs. So he probably goes to work, he works at the office, and then he comes home at the end of the day. So dad's spending all day at the office. Kids are spending all day either at school or they've just been sort of kicked out of the house and told to go and play and do stuff. So they're riding their bikes around, throwing rocks at birds, sort of getting into minimal trouble. Which there are some things that I don't really have an issue with there, but because a child needs to get into trouble to know what trouble actually is. But again, we'll talk about that later. And mom is spending all day pretty much by herself alone in a house. In an average size house for today. Like a house probably a little bit bigger than mine, and mine is over 1,800 square feet. It kind of creates, it's the creation of the housewife idea as well. Maybe not creation, because I think that was probably 20s or 30s where that term starts to get thrown around, but the 50s really perpetuates it and solidifies it as like, oh, the housewife. So what does this do? So because dad's at work all day, he is completely drained when he comes home and doesn't have really any time for anybody, for his wife or his kids. On top of that, usually he's getting home at like, I don't know, this is like the ideal of, oh, dad works 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Well, your office isn't exactly next door. So you're probably driving, and a vehicle's top speed was way lower than it was nowadays, so you're probably driving an hour to get to work every day. And an hour to come home. You're probably getting home about 6 p.m. So, family all gets together for family dinner, and that's like That's supposed to be an image of perfection, is the family in the 1950s having dinner around the table all together. And there's mom and dad and only 2 kids, which, again, I'm going to get to because that pisses me off. Or maybe 3. But
well, just like you're saying, it splits families up.
The
dad is moved there.
You don't have to be. It's not like they're ripped apart permanently. You don't have to do that to split up a family. The family is not together for like 10 hours every day. There's only 24 in a day, and ideally you spend 8 of them sleeping.
Yeah, so you have your little powwow at the end, and your dad's probably got his own hobbies too, and your mom's got her things with friends too, so that cuts into it.
Yeah, so you got 10 hours that you're apart. You got the other 14 that you're supposed to be maybe spending together, but 8 of those you're sleeping, maybe more because younger people need more sleep. Kids need more sleep. So that's 6 hours every day, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
That you're able to spend in your house not sleeping, and how much of that is actually spent with your children. How much of that is the family actually together? That may seem like quite a bit, but it's really not.
There's a really good song that describes this. Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. And
that's from the 80s, but yeah.
Well, it still reflects this. It starts with, because I have this pulled up. My child just arrived the other day. He came to the world in the usual way, but there were planes to catch and bills to pay. He learned to walk while I was away. And at the beginning, this kid is saying, I'm going to be like you, Dad. I'm going to be like you. And then when he's 10, he learns from a similar thing. Like he wants to go play with he got a ball from his dad, wants to go play with his dad with the ball. His dad says no because he's got the same type of stuff to do. And the kid walks away, but his grin doesn't go away. And he says, I will be like him. Mm-hmm. I will be like him. And that's not admiration. And then the end of the song is the culmination of that, where the dad now wants to spend time with his son, and his son is the one who's too busy. And it just perpetuates this cycle. Mm-hmm. But it makes sense why this would have come about. And I know we don't want to delve too deep into causes, but just structurally, we moved from small communities, small towns, to large communities, to large cities, part of the Industrial Revolution. And then we decided, well, I don't want to live in the city, but I don't want to go back to living the way I was before. I've got this job. I've got these friends. So why don't we all go put our houses off to the side somewhere in our own little group in this community as described, and we'll just have a nice time together, but we're not fully our own community. We're not our own community. Like, we're still going to have some traditions that pop up, but fundamentally we exist in a sense to serve the big city, or to do the thing that is done in the big city. And that isn't reminiscent of a community to me fully. It's partially reminiscent of what the colonies were, what the American colonies were to England.
Yeah.
Like, we existed to serve England.
That's a good point. The suburb is a colony of the city.
It basically is.
The suburb is the city colonizing the country. That's
yeah. And if you want to say I'm not fully right about that, like, fine, I don't care. The point is that the elements are there.
You're not entirely wrong. And for those that think there's nothing wrong with colonization, which there ultimately isn't. This is more for those who think that the word colonize is a dirty word. But that's effectively what it does. So basically it's you wanted your 160 acres of land that you're caring for, that you're the farmer, that you take care of, or you're maybe, it was a lot more modest in early 20th century, like your 20, 30 acres. You want to do that, but you kind of have to live in the city because that's where your job is now. Oh, well, how about this? Why don't we give you an acre or a half acre or 3/4 or
if we're generous, if we're really generous,
1/4. I think my house takes up like 3/4 of the actual acreage of my property. We're going to give you that, and then we're going to say, oh, be happy with this. It's just like you out in the country. And basically the suburbs are designed by people who live in the city to try to appeal to people who live in the country and make the country people feel like they're living the city life without actually living it.
And what does it do? It splits the direction of the family, because the dad has to keep his attention to the city, because he's got a job to do.
The dad has to go into town every day. The kids have to go into school, which the school may not have been all that far away. A lot of suburbs have schools.
Mm-hmm.
But the school may not have been far away, but they're still spending 8 hours a day there.
Mm-hmm.
And then mom is just stuck at home by herself all the time.
Yeah.
Doing, who knows what.
So when you say that isn't the nuclear family, that's because that's not the nuclear family as you defined it. And what's sad is this is not what we think of when we think of traditional families. We think of the dad being the only one that works.
Everybody's around the table.
Yeah, the dad is the only one that works. The mom stays at home and raises the kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's a terrible system in and of itself, because it can be done fine. But when everybody's doing it, and when everybody's attention is split in these ways, something is lost.
Well, and when it becomes this puritanical, this is how it is in every single possible case, and this is how it always should be, and anything else, literally anything else, is wrong and weird and abnormal. I am the man, so I have to go out and work every day. You are the woman, so you have to stay home and take care of the children and raise the children pretty much all by yourself, which we're going to get to that in a second. Mm-hmm. And then you, as the children, you should be seen and not heard. I don't want to talk to you.
Yeah.
You are here to be raised by your mother, and then you'll just suddenly pop into normal human beings someday and well-adjusted people.
And this doesn't stay confined to the family. I'll really quickly say, this doesn't stay confined to the family either. If you wanted a single hated institution to represent the spirit of what we're talking about, I propose the HOA, something that 99% of people hate for good reason. It makes life...
PTA.
What's the PTA?
Parent Teachers Association. Oh. You and I were homeschooled, so we never had to deal with this nonsense, but the PTA is, I would rather deal with them than the HOA, but they're not necessarily all that great all the time either.
Our PTAs were the kitchen table, actually. So, yeah. And I can work with that.
My parent-teacher meetings usually involved a wooden spoon.
Of one firm or another.
It was either in the pot or being applied to my backside.
Yep, exactly.
Welcome to the homeschool life, everybody.
Hey, we turned out good. Probably better than whoever's
I've got 3
watching.
Kids now, and I'm not even 30 yet. I would like to have 4 by the time I'm 30.
There you go.
I told somebody that once, and I told a lady that once, and she goes, "How old are you?" I'm like, 27. She's like, "You can slow down. You've got time. It's like you don't have to have a 4th one right away."
No, we got to make up for you, woman.
No, I got 4. Four kids by 30. If I get 5, even better. Better to have that many kids while I'm young and I can handle it.
There you go. There you go.
But
yeah, it's
so that was
no one likes.
Or
yeah, what does an HOA do? It makes life sterile. It makes life boring. It makes life. I do not have the control over my life in the way that I want to have, and I cannot be the individual that I'd like to be. And it's not selfish of me to say so.
Yeah, Gladys comes to your front door and tells you that your grass is a ½ inch too long. I like a little cushion under my feet. Sue me. Which here's just a little bit of a pro tip for people who are thinking about moving, maybe into a subdivision or maybe into a neighborhood. You are never legally obligated to join the HOA. They, under federal law, cannot require you to join an HOA, so you don't have to. So you can be the only guy in the neighborhood that leaves his trash can on the curb more than 12 seconds after the garbage truck picks him up. And you can be the only guy on the neighborhood that has, 3-inch long grass. And you can have the fun house. Everybody will know what your house is. And they can't do a damn thing about it. But they also can't necessarily run you out of the neighborhood. If you join the HOA, they can't actually run you out of the neighborhood. Unless it's like in the HOA contract. Where they reserve the right to sell your house without your knowledge if you violate their HOA rules.
Well, That will be a battle I cross.
I think in most places you just kind of get, kicked out of the HOA. So you were then no longer subject to their whatever benefits an HOA might give you, other than a headache and an excuse to go and get a prescription for Oxycontin.
Okay. But like so many things, it's done under the guise of being nice. Why do I want everything to look good? Well, because I want the value of my house to go up. That's like a fine thing, but it still destroys the individuality I'm talking about. And I think that's more important. Right. The same goes for a lot of the things that are going on with the family. Like the mom's got to get this new gadget. Okay, that's fine. The kids should go to this school. Okay, like that's fine in a sense. They need an education. The dad's got to go into town to work. That's fine in a sense. He does have to provide for his family. It's extraordinarily important. So, and yet the thing still gets broken.
So we looked at what, like, the state of a dad at the end of the day, because dad is, he spends, what is that? So it's 24 hours in a day, spend 8 of them sleeping, so there's 16 hours left, and you spend 10 of that away from your family on a regular basis, maybe more, maybe 12, up to.
Yep.
Away from your family on a regular basis. So that means
hour and a half in the morning, 2.5 hours at night.
Yeah, and the kids are probably going to bed before you are, so it's probably even less than that.
Yeah.
So you're probably mentally exhausted when you get home because office work is tedious and factory work is exhausting. If you were somehow able to work in a factory and afford a house in the suburbs. And you get home and you're just exhausted. You're just worn out. But on top of that, you were only spending 6 hours out of 24 every day with your kids. That's 25% of the day.
That's lucky by our earlier math.
And lucky if you're,
so yeah.
And that's the best possible case scenario. Well, the best possible case scenario is that you're one of those gentlemen that is fortunate enough to work from home and you're able to spend, if your kids are going to school for 8 hours a day, you're able to then spend however much more that is.
Mm-hmm.
Quick math is hard when you've had a glass of whiskey. Yeah, quick math is hard after corn whiskey. Let's put that on a shirt.
Sounds like something I can do.
So you also don't know your children. You don't really know them. It's like the man says, my son learned to walk while I was gone, while I was away. And the 10 hours a day thing, that's an average. And even the 12 hours a day is still preferable to, like, if you're a traveling salesman, because that was popular back then, a popular career, is you get sent halfway across the country to shove your foot in doors and sell vacuum cleaners to people that don't really want to talk to anybody. And you're spending probably a month or two at a time away from your family. You get home, you got 2 days with them, and then you're out the door again. Yeah, I understand why that's bad. And I'm not saying traveling salesman is bad. I'm saying that it's not a career for a man with a family. So dad's beat when he comes home. The kids are spending all of their time, basically all their time except the couple hours a day when dad's home, under basically the complete supervision of women. Whether it's mom or teacher.
Yep.
And what this does is create spoiled girls and feminine boys. And I'm going to ask everybody to think back, because I may have been homeschooled, but my wife spent 12 years going to regular brick and mortar schools. Think back to the teacher's pet of your class. Was it a boy or a girl? 9 times out of 10, teacher's pet is a girl. You're the oldest child. That doesn't count.
Oh, I was referring to confirmation class, but that's because I was the only one that cared. Well, I was a smart one.
That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you think about whoever the teacher's pet was, usually it's a girl. And the few teachers that are men probably have the same issues that your dad has. Your football coach probably has the same issues that your dad has. He probably also served in the war, which we'll get to. But and then mom being stuck at home all day, having nothing but chores to do, and occasionally she goes out and does her shopping. She's bored out of her skull because it's a push button era, push button convenience of everything. Automatic dishwashers, automatic dryers, automatic washing machines, refrigerators, automatic can openers, blenders. The number of gadgets that there were in the 50s blows my mind. That's stuff we don't even have now. A gadget you went out and buy to do a specific task.
Well, it still happens. And they get mocked for good reasons.
But it's like, none of that is in my wife's kitchen because she likes to cut things by hand with an actual knife. Also because it's harder to intimidate your husband when you put stuff into a machine and have it cut stuff up for you. A lot easier to get your point across when you're waving a knife around in your husband's face. Anyway. And she would agree with me on that.
No, I love that.
So what does mom do when she's really bored? Well, she probably has like a bridge club or a club of some kind, whether it's a fine arts league or whether it's your bridge club or whether it's this or that. And by the way, this isn't just in the suburbs. This happens in the cities and apartment buildings too, because ultimately life is the same. And they have their clubs and their fine arts leagues and their historical societies, which it kind of pisses me off when historical societies are run by suburban women. But anyway, that'll be in the You're Doing History Wrong podcast. So these women go out and they basically spend time around a whole bunch of women that are just as bored as they are. They go out and they drink tea because, we're Protestants, we don't drink. Nobody drinks wine except unless it's a really fancy dinner. But they go out, they drink their tea, and they have their chit-chat. But it's usually, what do they spend their time doing most of the time at these meetings? They're usually gossiping, which is never good for anybody, or they're complaining to each other about their husbands. And we'll get to that in a moment. So...
I mean, when does laziness breed anything good?
Never.
Exactly.
And not just laziness, but idleness. Mm-hmm. Idle hands do the devil's work, and an idle mind is the devil's playground. If David had actually gone to war with all of his men, he wouldn't have met Bathsheba. And Uriah would not have been killed. At least not in the way that he was. Anyway.
Yep.
So... Dad doesn't have time for the kids or his wife usually when he comes home from work. He's physically and or mentally exhausted. Kids spend all their time under the complete supervision of women, which leads to spoiled girls and feminine boys. And mom is bored out of her mind. And she fills her time with, like, if it's not a group, it's probably like a soap opera on the radio or later on television, or like just bad books.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad literature. And not necessarily morally bad all the time either, just like schlock. This garbage that nobody should ever read on principle because it's a badly told story.
Even if it's fine, even if it's good stuff to a point, we return to the same point about idleness and laziness. Like,
exactly.
It fosters what it fosters.
So what happens with men? So we're going to look at dad for a second. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. I know we already did, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. So the majority of men, I forget exactly what percentage it was, but I don't usually pay attention to statistics because, as Mark Twain said, there are lies, damned lies, in statistics. Most men in this era, this is, if it's 1950, you are literally 5 years removed from the end of the Second World War. 4 or 5, depending on the theater. And most men have served in that war. On one side or the other. Or not on one side or the other, but either in Europe or in the Pacific. Because the U.S. and Britain to an extent, but mostly the U.S. was kind of unique in fighting in both theaters at the same time, and being equally active in both. And we were actually the primary. The United States Marines were the primary force in the Pacific. So most men have been off to war. What happens to men who come back from war and who have seen war and seen battle? Because the Second World War is a post-industrial war when your entire squadron is wiped out before you can process it. Right in front of you. You're patrolling through the woods. All of a sudden, machine gun fire breaks out. 7 men are dead in front of you in seconds. This is something that never happened in history, or very rarely happened in history before the 20th century. Now, the guerrilla warfare has been around for a very, 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 very long time, and ambushes are a common thing, but it's that sort of thing ramped up to 100. You could even be in an active battle in a trench, fighting. There's back and forth. One mortar in the right spot, everybody but you is dead. And chances are, these are guys that you grew up with. These are guys that you knew. You knew them when they were kids. You remember when their first teeth fell out. You went to school together. You played together. You probably played soldier together, and now you actually are soldiers. You went to high school together, and you've just watched them all die brutally in front of you, blown to bits by mortar and shrapnel. You don't come back from that the same man. Rare is the man who goes to war and comes back the same.
Yeah.
And I have to question his mental state before he left, if that's the case.
Yeah, very fair. Even in that situation with the mortar in the trench, it doesn't just happen either, because there's all the lead up. You're training with your friends. You're getting deployed with your friends. You're sitting in that trench with your friends for maybe weeks. And yes, this is more World War I than World War II, but who cares? The point's the same. And even though you're trying to be brave, even though you're trying to defend your country, you know something like that's going to happen. Your squad's probably not the first squad to meet its end that way. So imagine the darkness ahead of time.
Yeah.
That then pays off.
There's that anticipation. And even if it didn't happen, that anticipation sticks with you. And that can even just eat away at your mind. And this can happen at any point in the war. It doesn't have to be like right at the start or right in the middle. It could be 2 weeks from the end of the war. And your commanding officer just came in and he said, "Oh, you know what? We're gonna be done. We're gonna march on Berlin, and then the war's gonna be over in about 2 weeks." Then when you're halfway there, you get in a firefight, and all of a sudden you're the only one alive. And then 2 weeks later, the war ends, and you can't help but think, what if I had done something different? Especially if you have any leadership position whatsoever. But so the dads in the 50s they have come home from that.
Yeah.
They are broken. Badly broken. But PTSD still goes virtually undiagnosed. It's basically still completely unacknowledged, except in the case of some Army doctors, or many Army doctors, and just in old Army tradition, that's like shell shock and battle fatigue are a thing.
But we just call it that.
It's so more I feel bad for, we just kind of feel bad for the guy that has really bad shell shock. For the guy that dives for cover every time he hears a car backfire, because his brain has that instinctive reaction to a gunshot, to anything that sounds remotely like a gunshot.
And I don't know how they looked at that at the time, but if I try and put myself in their shoes and I say, okay, so my friend over there is all of a sudden just acting weird and he's distant, and yeah, he's suffering from shell shock. He's seen the horrors of war. As have I, but I'm not suffering from it like he is, or whatever. I mean, if I don't understand that, how do I treat him? I push him off to the side to an extent, or I push the thing off to the side to an extent, because that's the only way to deal with it. It isn't even just
that, because most of the time, if you're devoted to somebody, you are going to do everything that you can for him. Because the guy that is shell-shocked and can't speak anymore, and can't really even function, somebody's probably going to take him in and take care of him. The problem is that institutionally there is no, it's basically just ignored.
No.
There's not even an attempt to do anything with it. Like, he's not quite the same, and every time we try to get him to talk about it, he just completely shuts down or he starts crying. So, we're just kind of gonna shove him off to the side. So because we don't want to have to deal with him, because we're trying to build a perfect society, and there's no room in there for that. So, and then
on some level, this is true. Yeah.
And then on television, everybody's perfectly put together. So what happens with these men who are broken and who instinctively know that they're broken? They wake up every night, they're having horrible nightmares. Audie Murphy woke up having terrible nightmares, screaming in the middle of the night. So what do they do about it? They self-medicate. Alcoholism spikes. There might be sudden outbursts of violence because the war has turned you into a violent man. Philandering. Which, for those of you that don't really know what that word means, that means cheating. It's cheating on your spouse. Or some combination of all those things.
I didn't know what that word meant either, but
that's what philandering, that means sleeping around.
Okay, then. Yeah, it's chasing pleasure to hide from pain. No.
And this ultimately just is the coping mechanism. And if you didn't do one of those, you probably had this mindset of, well, I just need to pull myself up by my bootstraps and suck it up and deal with it, which is kind of the mantra of the boomers when they look at any of the younger generations. Suck it up and deal with it.
We'll save that rant for another day. But
when any generation brings up a problem, an older generation says, suck it up and deal with it. Which that should not at all be the reaction. Yeah. But that's how they were raised. That's what they saw their fathers do. Dad had a problem, so he decided to suck it up and deal with it. But that is not possible. So what happens? He just kind of shuts down and checks out.
Mm-hmm.
And even for those who were not affected by war, for those who either didn't get drafted, didn't volunteer, or were medically excused because of flat feet or whatever, there are still some issues, because the regular average Joe is now a guy that works in an office, or he works in a factory pulling a lever 150,000 times a day. And those are basically your two options for what an average regular guy is. You're like an insurance guy, you're a sales guy, you're a marketing guy, you have some office job that people are familiar with kind of how the corporate world works these days. It was like the early days of that. And it's a daily grind of paperwork and chasing promotions. And office work is unsatisfying because it's not the kind of work that man was designed to do. A man was designed to toil. He was meant to use his mind. But office work isn't even intellectual work. It's just tedium. The man was meant to toil and labor. And the way you do that with your mind is wrestling with philosophy, the way Aquinas did. And science, and all of the intellectual disciplines. Not balancing the Johnson account, because there's no satisfaction in that. Like imagine the satisfaction that a mathematician feels when or a physicist, we'll go with a physicist. Imagine the satisfaction that a physicist feels when he proves a theorem or discovers a formula that he has been looking for his entire professional career. And he has spent his days working with numbers and with experiments and with this and that and the other thing. Mm-hmm. And he has given something to science. And then he can look at that A plus B equals C in front of him and say, I did that. And this is my offering to God and to the world. what of that is there in, oh, I balanced the Johnson account for this year, I'm going to have to do it again next year, or time to go to the Anderson account at this point. Just move on to the next one.
Well, there's something to be said for keeping things in order so that other people can do their jobs.
There is.
And so in the type of office work that you're talking about specifically, like there still is value. And so I probably wouldn't go quite as far as you did with it, but the fact that it is tedious is definitely there. And you have to do with it. Yeah. The larger point I agree with.
But so that is not something that a man who has spent 4 years with a gun in his hand can deal with.
That filter applied to it.
Add that on top of that.
That filter applied to it, that makes more sense. In a sense, it can be...
And also take a man in from the field and shove him in an office. Doing that. When instead of at the end of the summer, he can sit back on his front porch and look out at his field and look at the fruits of his harvest and say, what good I have done for my family, for my community. Instead, it's one thing after another. It is exactly the same thing every single day. You do exactly the same thing every single day. Oh, here's the Anderson account.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I imagine here's this contract we got to work on.
I imagine a couple scenarios. So take two broken men and put them in from the war and put them in that type of office job. And I can see one of them saying, and like one of them thriving there for a long time afterwards, just saying, okay, I don't know how
in his day to day.
Exactly. I don't know how to deal with this thing I'm dealing with, but I can at least do this. Plenty of things may suck about my life. I can at least do this. I can at least provide for my family doing it. Other flaws of the system notwithstanding. And you put the second guy in there, and he doesn't get the same sense of fulfillment out of it. And now he's stuck with a tedious job by himself, stuck with his thoughts. And we know what his thoughts are. That's hell. Like, that's actually a better description of hell, in a sense, in its worst form, than a place of fire and brimstone. Imagine hell as the place of ultimate loneliness. So,
but I would say that the ratio is way different than the one you laid out. I wouldn't say that for every one man that served in the war found peace, one man was tormented. I would say a lot more were internally tormented than actually found peace because of that.
Yeah, I didn't set it forth actually as a ratio. So fair point. I have no idea how that shakes out.
And that's not really something we can do because most of them are not alive anymore to be interviewed.
Yeah.
But so on top of The Office, and I have other reasons why I don't, because even for the guy that might find peace there, you're away from your wife and kids for 8 hours a day. And yeah, there's the solace of I can go home to them at the end of the day, but then it's also, well, I just got to get up and leave them again tomorrow.
Exactly, which just ties back to what we've been talking about, the fracturing of the family and all this stuff. So that's the offices. Factories are dangerous and the work is mind-numbing. Because there aren't a whole lot of safety regulations on machines. At this point, there's not lockout, tag-out procedures or anything like that. So a lot of men risk getting seriously injured in a factory, and it's the same kind of thing. There's no satisfaction of a work done or a thing made when your job is to put a bolt in a hole over and over every day. Because this is what now society says you're good for. And that's all society says you're good for. Mm-hmm.
Because, you can't do anything else. So how about you put a bolt in a hole all day long?
Tackle a theme from our podcast.
Again, add on the potential trauma from a war.
Yeah.
Having had a gun in your hand all day and then watching probably your best friend die in front of you. And then it's this. And then that creeping thought in the back of your mind, this is all I'm good for.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, oh, I'm doing this for my family so I can put food on the table. It's, this is all that I'm good for as a man. What is there for my children to look up to in me? Leo the 13th saw when the devil was let out of his cage.
And here we are talking about the century that he had. So,
again, the worst century in human history, the only one since the fall, when the devil was out of his cage.
Yeah, I had written this down as
Definitely
notes
the first time since redemption. The first time since the Passion of Christ that the devil had been out of his cage.
It's amazing how subtle he is. I had written this down to talk about actually later, like at the very end. But yeah, if you go step by step throughout all of the changes that happened, a lot of them, whether right or a lot of the decisions people made in response to those changes, in response to how society was moving, in response to all these disasters, whether the decisions were right or wrong, they're understandable.
Mm-hmm.
They're understandable reactions to a problem that is posed. Case in point, dropping the atomic bomb, not justifiable at all.
Yeah.
And yet,
understandable because we think that Japan isn't going to stop until we make them.
Exactly.
It's like these guys are literally hurling themselves at us, and they don't care at all about their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
They're diving in planes out of the sky at our ships because they do not care.
The United Nations, good idea? No. Did it seem like at the time that it was? Absolutely. We just came out of 2 world wars. We need peace. Like that's
NATO,
all we want.
A good
is just
idea?
Peace.
No.
Good. Same thing with the move to the suburbs. Well, I mean, living in the city kind of sucks. We don't want to be in this ultra concentrated place. It'd be nice to have a nicer home. So let's go do that. Okay.
That sounds perfectly reasonable, and I don't have any issue with that.
Yeah.
But again, how it's I don't necessarily have an issue with people who live in the suburbs. If you live in the suburbs, fine. You can pursue virtue no matter where you're at in life.
Exactly. But on a high level, there's a way to do that right, and there's a way to do that wrong. And we've grown up in a world that is the product of it done wrong.
Yeah, it was an entire century of doing literally nothing right.
Yeah.
So the third thing about work is that tradesmen kind of start disappearing because things are starting to be mass-produced, formulated, or shipped in from someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Which this is kind of an aside, and I'll go into further detail in it later. Every time you look at, let's take like a cereal commercial from the 50s. At some point, I guarantee you, if you find any random cereal commercial from the 50s, the words "our new formula" will be brought up at least once. I'm like, this is food. This is food. Since when is food made from a formula? I thought food was made from a recipe. Like everything's our new formula.
But a formula is a recipe, but it's more mass producible. Yeah,
it's a recipe for chemicals.
It's less home. I take back what I said about mass production. It's just less homey. That's good enough justification.
And scientific, which
yeah,
cold, scientific, and sterile, which describes basically the entire second half of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
At least the entirety of the 1950s. Everything is cold, scientific, and sterile.
A recipe versus formula is the old Cracker Barrel logo versus the new one that now they've retracted.
Uncle Herschel is a recipe. That new nonsense is a formula. That's all you need to know.
But yeah, craftsmen, the decline of them.
Yeah, on top of this, we've kind of dealt with this. There's a disproportionate number of children. I think supposedly the statistic is 35% of men who are like this, but I have a feeling it's way higher than that. That just seems low to me for men who have literally seen death for 4 years and then come home and are expected to just readjust. Too many children are raised by fathers who are absent in one way or another. And not like the absentee dad bit where you just, you bang a girl, you knock her up, and then you're gone. It's not that. It's dad's gone at work all day. dads, and when he's back, he's mentally checked out because he spent 4 years just killing all of his problems, and now he has children that he doesn't know how to deal with or handle because he's just spent 4 years just killing all of his problems.
Mm-hmm. Which honestly,
when
is
a
a
German
worse
soldier
fate
is
for
shooting
the.
at you, you can shoot back. When a kid spits up on you, you have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
So it's also kind of understandable why there was an instructional video in a class for literally everything in the 50s. Like there was an instructional book and instructional methods for new parents of like, here's this doll, this baby doll, and you're going to pretend this is a real baby, and you're going to go through the motions and practice with this baby doll until you get it right.
You sure that wasn't just like a marketing thing?
No, that was a real thing.
Well, I believe it, but like, was it for the purpose of marketing, or do you think that?
No, that was for the purposes of we're going to develop a method for everything, and it's going to be correct in every possible circumstance.
No. Because nothing bad can come from that.
No, never. Nothing bad ever comes from making everything look like everything else.
Mm-hmm. And
nothing bad ever comes from making Taco Bell completely indistinguishable from McDonald's.
Yeah, and the people that would be capable of seeing the problem with that, the men, are having their own problems, and the people that aren't capable of seeing that sometimes, the women, are doing all of the raising.
Yes. So and there's also this this goes back a while, but there also starts to be this underlying view of men that on the part of men that being married requires surrendering your freedom, or it requires giving up part of your manhood to a woman. Like, oh, is that ring on your finger or really in your nose? And she's leading you around by it. This is a genuine thing that happened, and it became a lot more prominent in the 50s. A lot of it, there's a lot of good-natured humor in it, where it's not really meant to be serious. But even when you joke about something like that, it can affect you, and it can still change the way you think. Even when you do something ironically, because we're mimetic creatures, even when you do something for the sake of irony, it can become serious. Or it can become genuine, because you're still putting that force of will into it that is necessary for your brain to process. Mm-hmm. And the more you do it, the more you basically stamp that into your brain. The more you repeat that pattern of neurons in your brain, the more your brain wants to repeat that pattern of neurons firing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So even if it starts out as just a joke, if it's just a joke for 20 years, it might wind up being a little bit serious.
And it has the power of being a great lie, because there's a core truth there, which is Ephesians 5.
You have to love your wife as Christ loved the church and laid down his life for her.
Exactly.
Which means, yes, when you're a husband, you have to die.
Yeah.
Guess what, fellas? Like Father Larry says, your life is over.
But that can be meant in a good way. Like the man is the head,
a lot of you I'm looking at, that's probably a good thing.
Like it is, you're supposed to lead your wife, but you're also supposed to listen. So her leading you around in that sense, like there's a part of that that's correct, a part of it, a way of doing it that is correct. And there's a way of doing it with some twisting that is rather insidious. And that's what you're describing when when the man has no soul for the leading and is just doing whatever his wife says.
Yeah.
Because she read in a magazine, oh, we need this. Or she watched on TV and like, oh, well, that's how we need to do things now.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily that either, because that's... So we've looked at men. Let's look at husbands. Let's look at their wives now for a second. And there's this image of the 50s when you see like the 1950s housewife, and it usually comes up in one of two ways. She's either like sitting casually on the kitchen counter, sipping her tea because, her day's work is done and she's got some time on her hands, or she's reading a book, or she's, chatting with some friends, or she's just, she's been beaten half to death because her husband is a drunkard and a violent man. Which is one of those, oh, it's a joke, but it's a joke that pretends that was literally every single possible case, and it actually wasn't. That actually was a minority of cases, but anyway.
Mm-hmm. And even if you're
more than you'd expect, but less than you think. So,
and even if you're a good mom in the middle who's working plenty and it's just like, I'm actually like doing a good job providing my family, I got no time to be the lazy one, and I'm definitely not the other.
So the women who are
that's what's being put in front of everybody.
Yeah. So the women who are moms at this time. So the men have been away fighting a war for half of the previous decade. The women in half of the previous decade were holding up society because the men were gone. They were doing men's work because the men were gone. They were the ones going into the factories. And they were told, oh, we can do it. They've got Rosie the Riveter rolling up her sleeves.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, we can do it. This is, this is great. We can do it. We can support the war effort. We can go to the factories and we can, we can make a difference and we can help. Because that is, when most of the men are away at war or have been killed by a war, women do have to take up their jobs. Because the jobs have to be done by somebody. And if the remaining men have to take up the jobs of the men who aren't there, that will kill them. So it was something that needed to be done. But these are all women who have basically convinced themselves that they can do all of the same jobs that a man can do while their husbands were away at war. And now they've just been locked in at home for 8 hours a day. They've been told, nope, you're a housewife now. That's what you do. You mill about and you dust and you do the dishes and you do the laundry and you vacuum, and that's kind of your entire day. And doing that in an empty house that's 1,500 square feet or more is mind-numbing. It is extremely boring. Like before my youngest was born, there were a couple of false alarms, so we had either my parents or my wife's parents come and take the older two, just so they'd be with grandparents while the baby's being born. And for like the day or so that those kids were gone, this house was the most boring place I've ever been in my entire life. The quietest, a mind-numbing quiet when there's no children in the home. And it's just, it was horrible. It was awful. I couldn't stand it. So I'm glad that I have 3 children now, and even when all 3 of them are crying at the same time, because one is 3.5, one's 1.5, and one is a month old, and there are many circumstances in which all 3 are crying at one time, at least it's not silence. Or at least it's not false. It's not a sterile silence. There's a word for it, but it's like an unsettling kind of silence. And it's just not natural. When you're used to, my 3-year-old daughter getting up in the morning, and from the time she gets up in the morning, the time she goes to sleep, she does not stop making noise of some kind. Whether she's like singing to herself, or she's just like pitter-pattering around, or she's dropping things, or, banging things together because she thinks she's a drummer, or that sort of thing. Like from the time she gets up to the time she goes to bed, she does not stop making noise of some kind. And then to be deprived of that, it's just like,
there's a good kind of silence we need, and we need more of it. But we weren't made for what you're talking about. No,
not that silence. And women are subjected to this for 8 hours plus every day.
Mm-hmm.
So no wonder they went nuts. Because that's basically it basically turns the house into a padded cell.
Yeah, like my house
and
can be boring enough.
If you're a little bit nuts when you go in, you're going to be a lot more nuts when you come out.
Yeah, so I'm a single guy still, and so Like tomorrow, I'm going to be working from home. I don't do it. I don't do it every day, but a couple days a week I do. And yeah, the house is going to be very quiet and very boring. If I had to deal with that 5 days a week, that would suck. And oh, by the way, during my setup, I'm actually working. Like I have
so you may be talking to a client on the phone
occupy,
or something at some time.
Yeah, I have something to occupy my time that is actually like good and productive and isn't lazy, at least part of the time. So yeah, imagine not having that. Like you get your chores done, they probably only take so much time, and then you're just like, what do I do?
So, and even with this, and even in the case where, and even with all that, women are also expected basically to raise their children and run their household entirely on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Which, even with the push button convenience of modernity, that's still a difficult thing to do.
Yeah,
it's actually a nearly impossible thing to do. Women's brains are actually not wired to do that. Again, because man is a creature of society. Like women actually do need to have other women to go to or to tell their troubles to. But when your time is taken up with, when your spare time is taken up with a group of women who are going through exactly the same thing you are, basically all you're doing is commiserating, and that never helps anything.
It's the earlier point about gossip.
So, and gossip is, I think, particularly more addictive to women. Men and women can both do it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like a gossip nerve in the human brain that gets tickled. With women, it gets tickled by what we typically see as gossip. Like, oh, did you know Shirley's been running around with the milkman? Really? I hadn't heard that. Oh my goodness. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
With the male brain, it's conspiracy theories. That's just gossip for dudes most of the time. But
that is amazing. That is an amazing way of putting that.
Because I keep hearing people say that, oh, gossip is just the female equivalent of pornography. I'm like, no, that doesn't seem right.
No.
That doesn't seem right. There is a female equivalent of porn addiction. I'm not sure what it is. I don't think it's gossip because men have a gossip nerve too. And I think that gets tickled with conspiracy theories.
Well,
that gets tickled with like so-and-so's on the Epstein list, and then it just spreads and whatever. But
there's a we both have it. We're fallen people, but there's a reason this stereotype exists for women.
Yes,
because it does, and it often is a lot more insidious than the over the top example that we gave. Now it's just commonplace.
Wind up accidentally destroying somebody's life because of a fake story, something that may not even really be true.
Well, and it comes under the guise of like, I need to process this, and it's like, no, you don't.
Like we have to talk about this.
Yeah, sometimes you do. That's the exception rather than the rule. When you actually have to talk
about this. Matilda bought a new dress and she thinks that she's the greatest thing ever. And then when she walks through the room wearing it, oh, Matilda, oh, darling, what wonderful dress that is. That's a stereotype for a reason. And that is in literally every sitcom that has ever been made for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Is they immediately turn on the dime when the woman they're talking about comes through the front door. But so there's that. There's women being expected to raise a family entirely by themselves because that's the woman's job. Men don't do that. Mm-hmm. Men can't do that. So these women it kind of seeps into their brains that this home is entirely my domain and my word here is law. So when the husband comes home from work, she starts harping on him like he's one of the children.
Dick, it's his domain as...
Don't lay down on the couch. Don't put your feet up on the table. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. And then, he winds up just having to retreat into his study because that is the only agreed upon room where he is allowed to go and have his way.
Mm-hmm.
Because all she does is nag him when he comes home from work. Because there's a reason that's a stereotype too.
And in case you're listening, you're like, well, I don't have a study. What the hell is that? It's your man cave now. That's the modern equivalent.
It's a different thing. The man cave is a significantly lesser thing than a study. But it's...
Yeah, but ultimately it is a place of retreat.
It's the second Cracker Barrel. The man cave is the second Cracker Barrel logo equivalent of a study. The man cave is to the study of what the revamped Cracker Barrel, what the Cracker Barrel redesign was to the original. That's what the man cave is to the study, which we'll go into when we talk about modern life and how this all. That'll be in a later episode, either the next one or the one after that. Mm-hmm. But so that's kind of what a woman's life is, and on top of that, there is this perfect housewife image. You know, the housewives on television, in the television shows, and in the magazines, and, you know, all sorts of constant advice coming from experts on how to be a perfect wife. And you must be perfect. I remember one I heard about was, it was either in a literal actual manual for housewives, or it was in a magazine of some kind, but it was basically this advice of, when your husband comes home from work, don't tell him about any problems you might have had that day, because he's just had a hard day at the office and he doesn't want to hear your problems.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. That's bullshit.
That's the opposite of what I want.
Now, having worked in a situation where I have been, you know, pushing carts full of metal all day, and I have been carrying an entire line on my shoulders, it felt like some days. And then I come home and then my wife immediately has a complaint. It makes you twitch a little bit, like, oh, nope, okay. But at some point, my wife got used to just like, let him come home and let him process, and then we'll talk about it. Because I also don't want to be the husband that comes home and just immediately starts complaining to her about how bad my day is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, neither of you should be doing it. Don't just sit there waiting for your husband to get home, or if you're the husband, don't just like spend the entire car ride home just waiting and stewing on it so you can burst at your wife with it when you run through the front door, or that you can throw it at your husband as soon as he comes home, because that's not going to do anybody any good.
Yeah.
But again, that's kind of another topic, because now we're into the what do we do about it.
Yeah.
And that's going to be later on down the road. That's going to be the final part of this series. So, deal with men, mostly deal with women, because husbands they're kind of checking out as husbands and as fathers. The women start to see them like, oh, you come home and you turn on the television and you sit in front of it all day. You come home and you just lay down on the couch, or you come home or you just read the news. All you do is read the newspaper in the morning and watch television at night. What good are you other than a checkbook? Like, I'm sure many is the man who has thought that, you know, if my checkbook had legs to walk and an arm to write with, it could replace me.
Yeah.
Like, too many men. It's like this nowadays too. Too many men are nothing more than a paycheck to the wife, so she can kind of have or do whatever she pleases. But he comes home and he's just sort of checked out because of one reason or another, because of the reasons that we've already laid out. And she doesn't really understand that, because they don't talk. There is no, oh, let's sit down and talk about our problems, because we're all just going to suck up and deal with it. Women too. And for women, that's a particularly harder thing to say than for men. Women are even less capable of just sucking it up and dealing with it than men are. And men really aren't all that capable of it either. So basically, it's, you know, what good are you to me other than a paycheck? All you do is pay the bills. And then you pay the bills, I raise the kids. You make sure there's food on the table and a roof over our heads. I'll make sure that the kids do okay. And I will do that without your help, because that is my job. That is what I do, and that is what I am supposed to do in this clean-cut, sterile, suburban society life.
Because this isn't a family anymore. This is now something closer to a business. And I have my specific task that I go to the corner, or rather the city, to fulfill. And you have your specific task over here that you're supposed to fulfill. And we're just supposed to be a team. But what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours, which is the reverse of what happens in marriage. So,
and it changed from the frontier days, because we're going to veer off for a half second here, but just as a comparison, and again, we'll go into this farther in the next one when we look at how we got to the 50s. But just as a comparison, on a homestead, and this is an actual homestead, not a social media homestead that people have decided to turn their backyard into a garden and call themselves homesteaders. I'm going to stop there before I start ranting and screaming at people that aren't in the room.
yeah,
On
they
an
got
actual homestead,
they got to start somewhere.
On an actual homestead, there are no men and women's jobs. Everybody has to do everything in order for the place to run correctly. A woman has to be able to pick up an axe and chop wood. She has to know how to sharpen the axe. She has to know how to shoe a horse. She has to know the same things that a man knows how to do. Because her husband could also just kind of up and die.
Yep.
And she, a lot of times, has to do it side by side with her husband. If she's not, like, baking bread or sweeping, because those are actually really important things to do in the frontier. If she's not baking bread or sweeping, she's probably outside helping him somehow. She has to go and fetch the water. She has to do this. Tasks that are maybe only technically feminine, but a woman still, especially when it's just a man and his wife, the wife has to be able to do everything her husband can do. And very frequently has to do it side by side with him. Or she has to be chopping the wood while he's pulling the plow, or they can't sleep tonight, or they're going to freeze to death this winter. So contrast that with the suburbs, where this is the man's part, and this is the woman's part, and it's these exact perfect little boxes. You earn the bread, and she slices it. It doesn't work that way. Not total. There is overlap and blending in the middle. There's not a clear line necessarily of where the husband's job stops and the woman's job starts. A man has to be able to do the things that his wife can do within reason, because a man can't have a baby, but a man has to be able to do the house chores because sometimes his wife can't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he has to step up and do it for her. And a woman should also kind of know how to fix things, because some things can't wait until your husband gets home to fix.
It's such a breath of fresh air to think about it that way.
The toaster's busted. Well, I need toast.
Who's going to fix it?
Yes.
Whoever is most opportune at the time. That's who. What this also reminds me...
to be fixed now, whoever knows how to fix it should fix it. And that way you don't have to immediately call the repairman to fix everything and wind up shelling out $85 for him to walk through the front door.
Mm-hmm.
For something that you know how to fix.
What this also reminds me of, and I don't know who just brought up this example, or at least the first part of what I'm going to say, so I'm stealing it from somebody. But what can happen within marriages is the man can be doing his job. He's off wherever doing his thing. And that's all he's doing. And he's just sitting there thinking, I wonder what my wife's doing right now. Like, she's probably got it really nice. She's taking care of the kids, and maybe they're even being homeschooled. Maybe she's homeschooling them, and she's doing the house chores, and just that would be like, that'd be great. That'd be great to have what she has. Why can't I have that? And so he envies the life that his wife has. Meanwhile, the wife is sitting there thinking, I'm raising the kids, I'm doing all the cleaning, I'm doing all these other things. This is my life. I wonder what my husband's doing. Like, he's off. He's just got his job. He does that. He comes home. He plays with the kids because he's a dad. That's what dads do. Like, that sounds really nice. I'd like that. And so she envies the husband. And there's a right answer to this, obviously, because that's a lie. That's not good. Envy's not good. It's a bad path to go down. However, like all insidious lies, there is a truth there, which is something about that system is broken. And it is right for us to cry out, in a sense, against that.
You have also described the synopsis and the plot of at least one episode of almost every sitcom ever made. at least in the 50s.
Well, then they're getting to something too.
The famous
whether they answered or not, I don't know. But
the famous chocolate factory bit from I Love Lucy is prompted because Lucy and Ethel think their husbands have it so much better than they do because they don't have to manage a home all day. And their husbands think that Lucy and Ethel, or Ricky and Fred think that Lucy and Ethel have it so good because they don't have to go to work. You know, Fred's the landlord of the building. He has to go out and repair everything that gets broken and make sure that the lights stay on and make sure that the heater's turned on. And, you know, Ricky has to go out and make sure that everything in a nightclub is running smoothly, which is a near impossible task because it's entertainment. And it's exactly that thing. So they all agree to switch roles for a week, and they barely make it through a day. The girls come in going, "Oh, work is a lot harder than we thought it was." And the husbands are home. Like Ricky does the laundry, and Fred comes in asking him about how to do his wife's stockings, and Ricky says, he's Cuban, so he's got the accent. He's got, "No, you got to make sure you just use plenty of starch when you do it." And then he pulls up basically what looks like just like an outline of a leg. He's like, "Do you see how good the creases are in that? It's beautiful." It's like, oh my gosh.
And is this a sock or a CNC machine template?
And Ricky decides that he's gonna make arroz con pollo for dinner. It's, you know, just chicken and rice. And he puts 4 pounds of rice in the pot because he doesn't know what the correct measurement is. Because these are all apparently just in Lucy's head when she's cooking. And, you know, it's just, he just is trying to remember from what his mother did in 30 years ago when he was growing up in Cuba. And like the rice overflows, it actually explodes. It gets on the ceiling. It gets everywhere. Everything in the kitchen is out of control and everything winds up being a mess. And then they come home and go, "You know what? You do have it rough. I'm going to shut up now." So that's kind of where that's kind of the most famous one, because the chocolate factory bit is Lucy and Ethel sitting at this conveyor belt, and the boss lady, because it's mostly women that work here, but these are probably women who are more poor and they have to work to be able to make ends meet. They and their husbands have to both work to make ends meet, or they're widows, lost their husbands in the war, and they have to be able to work because they don't have a husband to support them. So Lucy and Ethel are sitting there at this conveyor belt, and their job is to wrap the bits of candy as they come off the conveyor belt. And it starts to get faster and faster and faster and faster. And they start like they're shoving it in their mouths, throwing it down into their uniforms. And they're just sitting there. And they have managed to hide it when the boss lady comes back in and she says, "Oh, you did a great job. Speed it up a little," and then walks out. And it's like 3 times as fast as it was before, and they just completely lose their minds. So that message was definitely there of wives, don't be jealous of your husbands because work is hard. And husbands, don't be jealous of your wives because housework is hard. But yes, most of the time, nothing good ever comes of leaving a woman alone with her thoughts for 8 hours a day, or a man with his thoughts. But you know, for the most part, most men don't really have thoughts to be left alone with for 8 hours a day. So this is why it's a more particular problem for women.
We have the nothing box, ladies.
Yeah, we have a nothing box. That's our peace. We can just retreat to it. We can just shut our brains off and look at nothing. And it's wonderful.
Yep.
Until the wife is trying to ask you a question and then gets mad because it's the 3rd time she's asked and you've just been staring off at nothing and have finally realized that she's talking to you.
What were you thinking about? Nothing.
Nothing. I don't believe you. No, I was thinking about absolutely nothing.
Yep.
So
it's our internal toilet.
So that's men and women. Most men have kind of checked out, and the women are trying to deal with the men kind of having checked out. And now let's look at the kids. So the ideal family size was 2, maybe 3 children, which, by the way, is not actually good for children. Children need to have multiple siblings. For a number of reasons that I won't get into right now, but there are a lot of reasons why children need to have multiple siblings. And I come from a family of having only one brother and wishing that I had a lot more siblings.
I'll just offer one and leave it at that. If you have two, then technically you are contributing to the demise of the human race.
Mathematically speaking, yes.
Yeah, you have not met the replacement rate.
Mathematically speaking, every woman needs to have at least 4. Every woman that has children ought to have 4 at least. But the ideal was 2 or 3. At least this is what you would see in television and in the movies, with exceptions, because Yours, Mine, and Ours, as a book, comes out around this time, and that's about a man who has 9 children marrying a woman who has 8, or maybe the reverse. A Catholic family, by the way.
Like the man is one of 9 and the woman is one of 8?
I think, well, no, the man has 8 children and his wife has died.
Oh.
And the man has 9 children and his wife passed away, and the woman has 8 children and her husband has passed away.
Okay.
And then they meet and they get to know each other and they wind up getting married. So
this sounds
basically,
like
it's the chaos of taking these 8 and these 9 and saying, hey, guess what? You're all siblings now. Now all of a sudden you have gone from large to enormous because now there are 17 of you.
What came into my head was basically, it's rare that anything negative can be said about The Sound of Music, but this would have been a better version of The Sound of Music.
It kind of is, actually.
Yeah.
So there was a movie that they made, actually with Henry Fonda and Lucille Ball, that they made in, I want to say, the mid to late 60s. And then they remade the movie in like the 2000s with Dennis Quaid and Rene Russo. And the mid 2000s remake is actually pretty good. It delves a lot more into the comedic aspect of it. And the original one is a little bit more serious and kind of more accurate to the book because it was the mom that had written it. But anyway, so this ideal is 2 or 3 children, max.
Yep.
And there's a few reasons for it. And it's still like this today, is people look at you, like when you have more than 3 children, people start looking at you funny.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got 3, you're going to stop now, right? No. Why would I?
Every commercial you watch, it seems like it's 2 kids.
Watch, if there's kids, there's 1, 2, maybe 3.
Yeah.
But that's that was the ones that were adopted by the gay couple in the commercial.
Yeah, or it's we've got twins in the back seat and we've got an announcement like, hey,
yeah,
there's going to be an addition, and then the next scene it's 2 dogs in the seat next to the kids.
Yeah, it's
really
it's garbage like that. So there are a couple of reasons for this. Some of them are definitely said out loud. Some of them are kind of more subconscious and people get uncomfortable when you bring them up. And then some of them are sort of more the in-between, like they're whispered and sort of hinted at. So one of the ones that's not really outright said out loud, but is definitely there in the vibe is, oh, we don't need to have a large family because that's what poor people in the old country do. We're not a poor Italian family just trying to make ends meet and have nothing else to do in our spare time but make children. So we're better now, so we don't have to make as many children. Which then leads into we don't need to keep the replacement rate high because we have science or whatever it is, because our civilization has progressed. And I think some of it also comes from maybe this idea that the suburbs created of this, everything is this exactly this way and it is perfect and will always work every time if you follow these instructions or if you follow this formula or this pattern. So, and being in a Protestant mindset too, it's just assumed that every boy is going to grow up and get married. and have children, and that every girl is going to grow up and get married and have children. So, of course, why would you want more than 2 if every single boy is going to have children and every single girl is going to have children? They only need to replace themselves to keep it steady. Or maybe we can have 3 to grow the population a little bit. But any more than that, then we're going to overpopulate, and that's bad. That particular mathematical impossibility is bad. So another one comes from this puritanical idea that sex is a necessary evil that is used only to procreate. And even then, we should be using it only sparingly. And having a lot of children means that you and your wife have a lot of sex, and that is shameful. Again, Protestant drivel.
Yeah, because we've already split the husband and wife up enough, so let's not stop.
Yeah.
Let's just keep going.
Yeah. On top of that, let's have them sleep in separate twin beds. Ooh, light a candle, I got a twin bed. How romantic. There's also, and this is one that I hear a lot now, oh, kids are expensive. Kids cost money. And we don't want to lower our standard of living any. We don't want to live like poor people, so we're not going to have children. Or we're not going to have more than 2 because that's all we can afford.
I want to say so much about that, which will be saved for episode 2. But yeah.
That might be episode 3 because episode 2 is probably going to be more historical analysis. As the guy who plans and outlines these conversations.
Basically, I'm not going to get too much into the cause of it now, but beyond what you said, I feel like I need to have all of these things because other people have all of these things, and because there's some good to having all of these things, and now we can't afford kids.
Yeah.
No, you can. Something has been broken to get to that point.
And then, we're too busy to have and raise more than 2. Because kids take time too, and we don't have the time to be able to spend on all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this comic strip from the 60s, one of the best comic strips of that time, called The Family Circus. People sometimes, you may still see it in your newspapers, although I remember it disappearing from the Sunday paper when I was like 14.
This also requires our listeners to be the type of people that read newspapers. They have statistical improbability.
Well, that's also true. But there was this comic strip. It was one of those single panel comic strips like Marmaduke, where, there's only the one joke. And and the mom has all her kids. I think she's got like 8 kids. And the mom has all the kids in the park. And this other mom is with her, has her like 2 kids with her, and says, "Oh, how do you divide your love up between all your children?" And the mom with 8 kids says, "I don't divide it, I multiply it."
Now who's the poor one? One with 2.
And having 3 children and wanting more, when I could tell that my daughter was concerned about, because, she's 3. 3-year-olds aren't dumb. She can kind of tell that maybe, and she recollects a little bit from when her brother was born. So maybe mommy and daddy are going to have to spend a little bit less time with me. I'm going to have less attention. Attention you have to divide because that is a finite amount. So, mommy and daddy are going to have to divide attention. When I could tell that, I sat her down and I said, "Sweetheart, having another baby doesn't make me love you any less. It makes me love you more. Every new baby I have, each child gets that much more love. And it is an exponential increase." And I had to tell her a couple times, and, there are only some things about that a 3-year-old can understand. But I think she ultimately got the point. Because she's still, like, when I put her to bed, she wants me to tell her what to do if she gets scared, and she wants to talk to me about how much I love her and that sort of thing. Also, because she's a girl, I don't see my sons ever doing this. I'm like, "All right, sure. Good night, Dad." Or my sons will be like stroking my beard and they go, "Oh, what's that? Is that a nose hair?" Wank. Like,
yeah. That sounds like a reasonable thing.
I think I'm bleeding. But so anyway, that's another slight diversion and more that we're going to probably try to delve a little bit deeper into when we get to the practical one, which would probably be part 4 of all of this, to be perfectly honest. At this point, we'll have to see. But
any diversion that involves an image of you talking with your incredible daughter Celeste is not a worthless diversion. That is amazing, especially since I'm spoiled and have actually seen the image in person. But just to describe it for everybody else, that is beautiful.
And I will brag on her a little bit. She's a perfect big sister. She's like the best big sister you could possibly imagine.
Celeste is amazing.
Particularly being 3.
And she loves me more than you, so she's smart.
You're not wrong. That's because you buy her things. That's because you buy her things, and a 3-year-old's love is conditional. It's purely a purchasable commodity.
I've only done that once or twice.
Which is 1 or 2 more times than I've ever done it.
You buy your... Don't kid yourself. You've bought stuff for her.
I know. I have.
Obviously you have. But I know what you mean. I'm the uncle, and she's a beautiful but stupid kid, because all kids are kind of stupid.
So those are kind of the lies about having a lot of children that get spread in the 50s. To take this back around to our actual conversation, people are only expected to have 2 or 3. If you have 4, it's a little weird. And then if you have any more than that, it's like, what is wrong with you? Or people that talk about having 12 or more, they're like, whoa, who are you? Or like, are you from the old country? Or like, that's the old way. We don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know my mom got comments because I'm the oldest of 5. And so we are the big
5.
family. Yeah.
That's 5. I know at least 3 families that have 12 or 13.
Yep. My dad was 9 out of 13, I think. And if I'm wrong about that, I'm not wrong about the 13 part. So
I'm sure your dad's mom got comments too. Like, what is the matter with you people?
Although at least that was back in the 60s, and it was out in rural Minnesota. So
probably wasn't quite as bad.
Yeah.
Because the country always takes a little bit of time to catch up. Or at least it did before the internet.
Yeah.
So on top of that, there's usually... It's not even that there's only 2 or 3. It's usually 2 or 3, but with more than 2 years difference between them in age. It's like the daughter is in high school, the middle child is in middle school, and the youngest child is in kindergarten. There's significant differences in age, which means that there are significant differences in maturity. And you couple that with the following, that through the school year, children are spending their entire day surrounded pretty much only by their peers, by other children their age, or like within a year of the same age as them. So it's negligible. So they start forming those cliques, and there's like a hierarchical order among children based on their age. Like the younger kids all want to be like the first graders are all like, oh, look at how big the 4th graders are. And then the 4th graders are like, look at how big the 8th graders are. And then the 8th graders are like, look at how big that high school junior is. But on top of that, the high school junior is, puny little 8th grader, get away from me. And then the 8th grader goes, puny little 4th grader, get away from me. And then the 4th grader goes, puny little 1st grader, get away from me. You're nothing to me. Because all that matters is what's around me. It's my little circle here. And we know better. And that is not a society. And that is not teaching children community.
It's fracturing it.
Because nowadays, this kind of starts the idea of community, of what a community is, being this group of people that are united by literally only one thing. In the classroom, it happens to be their age. That may be like the only thing that they have in common. On top of that, there's an expectation that every boy is like this and every girl is like this exactly and perfectly. Now, the stereotypes exist for a reason, because boys will always tend one way and girls will always trend the other way. But a tomboy is a thing. And sometimes there are boys that are just a little bit more meek and would rather spend their time reading than playing football. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
But even to children, there's this idea that, like, nope, you're a boy and that's for girls, or nope, you're a girl and that's for boys. Whatever it was. Sometimes it was right, sometimes it was wrong. When it was wrong, it was very wrong. And there's also another result.
It makes sense it makes sense that would be less present, though.
Yeah.
In a family that is more united.
Yeah.
So,
because one of the things that I see with a lot of the families that have a bunch of children, like more than 5, even the ones that just have 5, and especially when they're reasonably close in age, when there's 2 years or less between them in age, they're always very close. And they don't really have, like, the older kids don't really have that many issues with the younger kids unless there's just a genuine horrible personality clash. Which, that does happen. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. And I'm not going to pretend that families of 13 kids are always perfect, because they're definitely not. But the risks of, oh, my little brother's a twerp, are significantly reduced when, 1, you're only a year apart, and 2, there are 10 more of you. Because in the home, you are learning how to interact with every type of person. In your family group and in your general community, you're learning to interact with every type of person. Because if you have 10 children, that's 10 different individual personalities.
Yep.
And for every child, the other 9 have to learn to deal with him, and he has to learn to deal with each of the other 9. And submit to the authority of his mother and father. And still be able to carry on a conversation with his mother and father, who are at least 20 years older than him. And be able to submit to the authority, show respect to, and carry on a conversation with his grandparents, who are at least 30 years older than his parents. And even potentially his great-grandparents, if it goes back that far.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I digress, because when you remove the children from the home like that, and again, the school year is, 8 months out of the year? Roughly?
Mm-hmm.
For 8 months out of the year, the education system replaces their parents. Your primary authority figure in your life is your teacher or your principal. Oh, television may say it's your father, but practically speaking, it's your teacher, who may have a very different idea about child rearing than your parents do, even though she's 26 and just out of teaching college and has no idea what she's talking about and doesn't have any children of her own.
Mm-hmm.
And again, these 26-year-olds just out of teaching college want to come into a classroom of 10, 11 kids, which is a modest-sized class for even today, and treat them all as though they're exactly the same person. Or have the only subdivision of the boys, it's like this, and the girls, it's like this. Boys have to sit in the front because they're necessarily going to be more rambunctious, and I can keep a better eye on them. So it's okay if the girls can't hear me, because I'm keeping an eye on the boys and making sure they're not misbehaving. And for the girls, it's whatever it is. And then it ultimately just becomes, all children in the classroom need to sit perfectly still and stare at the blackboard. Oh, you're a boy? No, now you're ADD. You're ADD now. You can't sit still? Well, you must have a disorder that we need to drug you up with to deal with.
Damn,
that's
over
not necessarily an
feminization
issue
of women.
That's not necessarily an issue of the 50s, but it's kind of like that. And it kind of starts, what kind of starts this is, again, this idea of, particularly with all children in general, but particularly with boys, is they're spending basically every waking hour except 2 or 3 that they spend with their dad, or if they get sent to the principal's office, or if they're lucky enough to have a single male teacher, they're spending probably 80% of their waking time under the direct supervision of women and females who have decided that they have to behave a certain way. That the women have decided that little boys need to behave the way women think they ought to behave. So, boys have a tendency towards aggression. Well, that's bad. We can't hit people. We mustn't hit anyone. We must never solve a problem with physical force, because that only leads to more physical force, and that's never good for anyone. So, we have to rise above and be better than physical force and not lower ourselves to that. And whatever it is. So basically, that's the start of boys being told that every masculine urge that they have is bad and wrong and needs to be suppressed. And then we'll get into that more later when we see about the effects of the 50s on the rest of the 20th century as far as family life is concerned.
Yeah, we'll get into that more later. But just at a
because their mothers are telling them the same thing.
Yeah, so it's systemic.
So one of my and my wife's favorite sitcoms. This is actually Genevieve's favorite sitcom from that entire early period of television, is My Three Sons. I've told you about what I'm about to tell you about before, but it bears repeating here. So the premise of My Three Sons is that there's a dad with three sons, as the name implies. His wife has passed away, so his father-in-law has taken it upon himself to be the closest thing to a woman they have in the house. He was a cook in the Navy, so he comes in and lives with them and does the cooking and the cleaning and all that. And they call him Bub, because that's all that the oldest kid could say. The oldest kid couldn't say Grandpa. All he pointed at him and said, Bub, and then that's what they just started calling him from then on. Which, Bub is a way better diminutive of Grandpa than a lot of the other ones that I've heard. So there is an episode where the youngest boy, Chip, which is like the most 1960s little boy nickname that I've ever heard. But the youngest boy, Chip.
Sounds like he's going to be a teenager in the 80s. Oh wait, he will be a teenager in the 80s.
He'll be a teenager in the 70s or the 80s. So, so Chip is a Cub Scout, and at this time, when you and I were Cub Scouts, we had men for den leaders. When in the 60s, they had den mothers.
Yeah, when you first told me that, I
even
was
in
really
the Cub
surprised.
Scouts, they were put entirely under the supervision of moms and of women. Well, so the Cub Scouts have their meetings underneath their den mother, and there's an issue. There's these two older boys in the neighborhood who keep coming around and messing with them and bullying them. Anytime they build something, these two boys come in and they knock it down. Anytime they are having a conversation, these two boys come in and they're rambunctious and they interrupt it. And they're a couple years older than all the Cub Scouts, and they're significantly bigger. And so they're afraid of them. But naturally, when that happens, when aggression is done to a boy, he wants to respond with aggression. But this woman basically keeps telling them, we must rise above the simple aggression. That is a bad thing. We don't want to fight anybody, because that's not good. All that does is cause problems. And I can understand where this comes from, because now your image of fighting is war. And you think that, the boys having, I'll meet you behind the bleachers in 10 minutes and I'll teach you a lesson. You think that's going to lead to a world war. Because I know a little bit of how a woman's brain works, I can see how that leap. So this is understandable, but it's also bad.
Yep.
And wrong.
We don't want eye for an eye, but we don't want, you can't always turn the other cheek. There's such a thing as justice.
This woman has been telling these boys that we need to rise above and we need to be better than that. And, not get our hands dirty in any way. And then by the end of the meeting, she says, we have to move away. I can't be your den mother anymore. And now they need a new den mother. Turns out none of the other mothers can do it. So the den is going to be dissolved. And then Chip speaks up and says, well, I don't have a mother, but I got a grandfather that's like the closest thing to a mother I've got. And so then the other women, because for some reason they have input, begrudgingly allow him to be the den mother. And along comes this bake sale, and Bub is played by William Frawley, so he's this short and stocky old cranky Irishman. Along comes this bake sale, and these boys have baked cakes, because that's how I want my son to spend his time, is baking cakes. Even though baking is a spectacular art, it's a wonderful thing. Some of the greatest bakers in the world are men, but I digress. So there's this bake sale for a fundraiser or whatever, and these older boys come along and they start sticking their fingers in all the cakes and like tasting them and ruining all the cakes and all these other boys' hard work, because that's a difficult thing to do, especially when you're 7.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't notice Bub, and they're standing in front of these 2 cakes, like glaring or leering down at the younger boys, going, "Oh, what are you going to do about it?" And then Bub comes up behind them, and he puts his hand on their base, on the backs of their necks, not even on their shoulders, on the backs of their necks, and says, "Oh, you like the cake, do you? Well, then have some." And he smashes their faces into the cakes, and like swishes them around a little bit, and then lets them up, and they start crying and run away. And all the younger boys just start cheering, like, "Yeah, that was awesome." But all the other mothers are there. And they have just seen that. And now they go, "Oh, we don't want this our boys around this man, because then they might become violent. That was crude and impolite, and we don't want our boys to do that sort of thing." So then they all just, one by one, drag their sons away, and then try to vote to eject Bub as the den mother and dissolve the den, because they would rather have nothing for their boys to do with their spare time than have their boys spend their spare time with a guy who was actually just doing the right thing. Because again, it's this idea, a woman does not know how a boy is or how he thinks, because she never was one. A boy is not a male girl.
And ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Like, you could nuance the discussion. You can say,
ultimately,
sure,
by the way, for
this,
anyone
that,
worried, it does turn out okay, and they do wind up allowing Bub to continue, because the sons are just so sad and depressed, and they look up to him so much.
Good.
And then the mothers are like, "Well, maybe it is good to have a strong man for them to look up to." But so when they spend basically their entire time under the basically the total supervision of women. So, and in the cases where dad has basically just checked out, and the only time he spends any quality time with his son is on Saturday going fishing or working in the garage, because he spends all day on Sunday sitting on the front porch reading the newspaper and smoking. Don't bother dad on Sunday. Or he just sits there. And there is something to be said for sitting there on your front porch watching your children play in the front yard, because you do need that too.
Mm-hmm.
But you should also probably get up and join them.
Well, that's just different from the image of, yeah, you're bothering me, boy, get away.
Yeah.
You know?
So
I guarantee the enjoyment will come. Even if it's behind the door of your bathroom while you're just sitting on the toilet, you're going to have that time.
And this is partly what this does, especially in the households where dad is checked out for all the reasons that have already been laid out, which are understandable. And in some cases, not actually the fault of the man, because he doesn't know how to deal with any of this, because he's kind of the first generation of men that has to. Mm-hmm. So it's understandable that he doesn't get it right. And mom basically just has to completely take over raising the children. She winds up just raising the boys as though they're girls, and anytime they act out as boys, that's bad or that's wrong. So what the girls get in that case is they grow up watching this. And they grow up watching, oh, well, dad never really did anything, and mom did all the work. And because of how the relationship is between a man and his daughter, it is very, very hard. It is way harder for a man to discipline a daughter than it is for him to discipline a son. Even now, even though my sons are both very small and very adorable, I guarantee you it'll definitely be like this when my son is 3. So anytime my daughter comes up to me and goes, "Daddy, Daddy," which she does about 5 or 6 times before I leave her room after going to bed, not turning around and saying, "What is it, sweetheart?" is like a knife in my heart because just of the preciousness of a little girl.
Yep.
Meanwhile, I put my 1.5-year-old son down for bed, and he then starts screaming his head off because he doesn't want to go to bed yet. And I'm like, suck it up and deal with it. Slam. You got to go to bed. Too bad. Too bad. You're tired. You need sleep. I just shut the door, and then I don't see him again until the morning. And I'm sure it'll kind of... Sure, like my daughter at 3 years old goes, "Daddy," and not saying anything is like a knife in my heart. But then my son at 3-year-old is going to be like, "Daddy," and I'm going to be like, "What?"
Yep.
Or just, no. No.
No, exactly.
It is way easier to be firm and cold to your son than it is with your daughter. So, dad never wants to be the disciplinarian with his daughter. And in the homes where dad winds up having the final say, the daughter can wind up getting away with murder. And so girls wind up being spoiled. And boys, well, the girls wind up being spoiled. And they see this notion of, well, my dad didn't really do anything except go out and work. And my mom did everything around the house by herself. So when they grow up, they either think that they need to do that, or they just completely reject the notion entirely. So they basically just completely reject marriage entirely. And that's kind of how we get feminism.
Yay.
But anyway. So the girls grow up with false expectations of what fatherhood is and what motherhood is. So, and because they're watching their moms do literally everything.
Yep.
And they're watching their parents be miserable because society is telling them that it's this perfect little box that they need to fit into.
Yep. You just act accordingly then.
Boys are feminized and not taught how to be men. They're not taught, yes, a boy should learn how to fight. Or if the few times when a dad is like, "Come on, boy, get some gloves on. I'm going to teach you how to throw a punch." That bully's been after you for a year. I'm sick of it. You're sick of it. You're going to teach him a lesson. The first thing mom says is, "Oh, no, don't do that. Oh, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. That'll teach him violence, and we can't have that."
The first
and then,
thing,
of course, when he finally
does
stand up and punch the kid in the face, that other kid's mom is even worse. And
yep,
it's one of the starts of fathers basically, because it isn't necessarily just the young boys. The fathers are being told that their natural inclination as fathers is wrong, that they just need to be listening to their wives because women intuitively know how to raise a child in every circumstance. Or because my wife has read Dr. Spock. My wife has read Dr. Spock, or I read Dr. Spock, and Dr. Spock says this, so we can't do that. We can't spank our children anymore. Anytime a dad reaches for his belt, the wife steps in front of him. "Don't you dare hit this child." Like, he just punched his little brother in the face and broke his nose. I think I'm going to hit him. Because chances are, if I'm spanking a kid, like for a while the argument was don't spank a kid, it teaches him how to hit. If I'm spanking a kid, there's a good chance he already knows how. And it's probably why he's getting the whip. Probably why he's getting spanked. For those of you Christians that are getting mad, I will direct you to Proverbs, where it says that by beating your son with a rod, you will lead him into salvation. I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact verse, but that's basically it. Again, I'll bring that back when we talk about the actual practical application of family life.
Yeah. The debates about forms of discipline can be saved for another time, but the basic point is that it is manly to seek justice.
It is manly to seek justice, and in some cases, it is manly to pursue it. And in some cases, that requires a little bit of violence. Because men actually were made to do violence to each other or to, wild beasts to roast over a fire. So on top of this, and this is for the younger children. Older children, we get the teenager problem.
Yep.
Which is the result of partly a result of them having been locked in a room for 8 hours a day with nobody but other kids their own age and the teacher. It's like, because the concept of the teenager was not a thing before the 20th century. I think it's like the 1930s that phrase is first brought up, or that term is first brought up. It might be before that, but I'm pretty sure it's like the 1930s. Because culturally speaking, when we take the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression out of it, the 1930s was like the trial run for the 1950s.
Oh, okay.
Family life kind of looked like that. Again, we'll get into it later.
I mean, but when you bottle up the manhood of a boy, it's got to come out somehow. And if you bottle it up, you made the situation disordered as the parents. So a disordered solution is
hit him
going
when
to
he's
come.
14, when his, and they get wild when he's even older.
He's been taught how to regulate the wrong things and not how to regulate the right things.
And not even how to regulate them properly.
Yeah.
He hasn't even been taught to regulate. He's just been taught to shut them down. But there's also this, and this is among all teenagers, not just boys and not just girls. There's this idea that, well, a teenager is a child on the cusp of adulthood, or, adolescence is the trial run for adulthood, so you just need to let them be free and do whatever they want. And you need to let them be independent. And, you need to let your daughter scream at you that she hates you and slam a door in your face because you told her not to see the kid with the motorcycle and leather jacket and butch haircut because you don't think he's good. Mm-hmm. You don't think he's any good for her. Or you need to let your son, basically completely ignore you and pretend you're not even alive. Because that's just the way teenagers are. They'll grow out of it. They'll fix themselves.
Yeah, but even then, the version of that joke is like, yeah, they'll fix it, but they'll remember it when they're 27.
Yeah.
No, oh yeah, they actually were right that whole time.
And they'll just never grow up, which is how we got millennials and parts of Gen X, where we have grown-ass adults who are just permanently, emotionally halfway through high school. Again, part of the...
I'm no expert on the generations, but fair enough.
The fallout of the 1950s.
Yeah.
Which we will discuss next time.
That actually may be a good spot to...
and where it led. So that's where we're going to end. Ultimately, I have said a lot of really bad things about the 50s. There were many good things about the 50s. There was economic wonder. It was a serious economic boom. But again, those can only last for like a decade, and then everything starts collapsing. But definitely don't ever glorify the 1950s as what you should be looking towards. When it comes to the idea of what a family should be, you are far better off looking at the average family before the year 1900, for reasons that I will get into next time.
As we will. So, yeah. Chew on that this week. And y'all have a good one. So, and go spend time with your family. That's your homework.
Play with your kids. And love your children. And your wife. And be sure that they are always first. Or at least that they are always before you.
And so that when your dad says, I'm going to grow up and be like you, that you're actually proud of who that kid will actually turn out to be if he does that.
When your son says, I want to be just like you, be proud of him when he's better.
That too.
Don't seek for your children to be like you. Seek for them to be better.